So, believe it or not, this year, or at least the start of this year, it has been officially 5 years since Brexit. I know. How how have we managed to last this long? But no, remember, um, obviously 2016 is its own point, but 2020 was officially the day we left the European Union. And that was, of course, the point at which all the Brexiteers are saying, doesn't matter about any of the economic information or anything like that. It all matters from 2020. Like, don't worry, guys. 2020 is going to be the most fantastic, wonderful, best year ever, which completely shows that, the British people made the right decision. And then, of course, the pandemic happens. And as I've said many, many times, the pandemic was like the best thing to happen for Brexit, because it has really been able to like distort numbers, and it has left a lot of economists really having to find out what is actual Brexit damage, what has been caused by the pandemic, what also has been caused by the war in Ukraine and etc. There's a ton of stuff that has happened in and around Brexit, especially through the past couple of years, that's made it somewhat difficult, really, to say what is actual Brexit damage and what isn't. And of course, this has been the game for the past couple of years, saying, that's not Brexit damage, that's post-COVID recovery damage, or that's COVID responsible for that, not Brexit, or that's because of the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, as we've always said in response to this, well, other European countries have been going through this as well. They haven't had the same problems we have. But now gets even more ridiculous, because obviously it's been 5 years. And if you've been watching people like Daniel Hannan or anyone like that, a couple of these economists have now started saying that actually this is the year we need to start, tracking the true Brexit process. Just the past 5 years, just ignore them. Just ignore those past 5 years. It all starts from here. And in fact, Truth to Power actually beat me to it. He did a video on the Brexit the movie, because there's a bit in there where Daniel Hannan paints a picture of what post-Brexit Britain looks like in 2025. And oh boy, to say that he was wrong. Yeah, he got it wrong. So yeah, go give Truth to Power's video a watch on that, because it is quite funny. It is very, very funny on that, just how wrong Daniel Hannan really got the predictions of the UK in 2025. But on to this, because today we're going to have a look at something else. We're going to have a look today at a Brexit economist trying to have a go at all the data that's come before to actually say, well, actually, Brexit has been a roaring success, without actually saying Brexit has been a success, but just rubbishing all the actual information that has come out recently. Again, 5 years, big landmark. You'd expect, if Brexit is to be a big success, maybe finally, guys, you can actually, start showing it. But of course, as always, that always seems to be the problem. So before we do get into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one on today's link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. This, coming from the New European, with the title of "The Telegraph is Wrong Again About Brexit Damage." So the year is only just 2 days old, and already the Daily Telegraph is out on the Brexit warpath. It has published yet another piece claiming that despite all evidence to the contrary, leaving the European Union has not been the disaster that we believed it to be, and that those who say it must have gone must have got their figures now all jumbled up. This article is by one Julian Jessup, an independent economist affiliated with a very discredited Institute of Economic Affairs, think tank. Yes, the IEA. Of course, they're coming out to say this because that is a whole part of their free market fundamentalist, uh, you know, dogma that, now we've left the EU, we can go on this, free market fundamentalist spree, which, Truss almost did, and then, crashed the economy. That was the institute she was getting all her advice from, all her policies from. Doesn't look like they were that good a think tank. So, back to this. Of course, this think tank brought you the triumph that was Trussonomics, as we've just said. And I have noted that he now occasionally comments on my articles in a tone, of course, as a disappointed teacher seeing a dull student make another basic error. To be fair, I am not an economist, but Jessup is. And he seems determined to make the so-called dismal science even more dismal. His Telegraph article starts with the observation that Remainers like myself have been saying that leaving the EU is costing the UK economy some £100 billion a year, or 40 billion in tax, or, to put it another way, 4% of the country's GDP. And Jessup's contention is that figure is now plain wrong. However, this figure, of course, didn't start with Remainers, though. It is based on research by the Office for Budget Responsibility, an independent government body funded by the Treasury. The OBR has predicted pretty much from the start that low trade, less investment, and lower productivity would hurt the British economy at a cost of 4% of growth over the next 15 years. Again, OBR right on that. And I want to point out that the right has like this love-hate relationship with the OBR. They hate it when the OBR tells them they're wrong, but if the OBR puts something out that they can spin to say, you see, our policies were right, then they absolutely love the OBR. Make no mistake that if the Conservatives ever get in power again, next time the Office for Budget Responsibility is gone. Like, they will get rid of it, even though they're the ones who invented it, or at least brought it into being, shall we say. So, besides, of course, claiming that trade has not been damaged as much as the OBR thought, which, of course, is in itself an admission that Brexit has damaged trade, Jessup goes on to claim that the OBR's calculations do not take into account the benefits of Brexit, such as new trade deals or lower regulation. And then he admits the reason that they don't do this is because they are so small as to now be meaningless, or they haven't even come to fruition yet. So imagine that the benefits of Brexit are so small as to be completely meaningless. Wow, what a benefit. just imagine that for a second. The benefit of Brexit are just so small that they are just completely meaningless. I think that speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? And then, of course, I love this other one because we've heard this every single time. They haven't yet come to fruition. We're forever waiting on these Brexit benefits. Next year, we could be there. And yet, you would have Brexiteers right down the line saying, oh, don't worry, this is the year. This is the year. We're still waiting on them. Anyway, it continues. He goes on to criticize the OBR's work for being an accumulation of 13 other studies into the subject, citing other element experts used to be seen, of course, as a rather good thing when I was a student, but apparently it is now a terrible weakness. Again, like I say, hate the OBR when they are proving you wrong, love the OBR when you can cite something from them, and trust me, right-wingers will cite the OBR whenever it suits their case. But if the OBR comes out and says something they don't like, well, OBR is very just wrong there. So Jessup, of course, then takes aim at the work of several other people, including John Springford for the Centre of European Reform, who created a doppelganger of the UK economy to which Brexit never happened. This shadow economy, built through sophisticated modelling, rejects, just as the UK had done in the past, that we can now see how the UK performed in comparison with the model since Brexit. Springfield models assist that the hit of Brexit is being at least 5%. However, Jessup says that there is now a fundamental flaw in models like these because he claims that they assume that any divergence in economic performance between the UK and the control group can only be due to Brexit. This is clearly nonsense. His point is that modelling such a gloss over of the impact of either COVID or the global energy crisis is naive. And yet, here's the thing. These things that happened with COVID, they happened in other countries as well. But they are fine. And yet, when you've got a doppelganger economy set up like this, which again, other countries do this when they are doing things like this as well, it says actually, Brexit's done a lot more damage than both these two things. So back to this. Surely, of course, he says the whole point of a doppelganger model is that Brexit is the only difference between it and, of course, the UK. The doppelganger would react in the same way as the UK to other shocks like COVID, as both experience the same shocks. However, Brexit is the shock that the twin doesn't and then can't be affected by. Jessup does go on to suggest in his own model for comparison, the euro area. This concludes, by his own admission, the notoriously unreliable GDP figures from Ireland and Germany, which Jessup doesn't even mention has been hit far harder than most of its peers by the energy crisis and other problems. It's almost like economists sometimes make these things up. But if you want a good channel that talks about economics and things like that, I do definitely recommend Unlearning Economics. Very, very good channel. Anyway, back to this. So using this model, he concludes that the UK is just 1% worse off than it would have been without Brexit, or the £25 billion pounds a year. If this were the extent of the damage, it would still be small, be it a small hit. And of course, one that would go on for a sting for years to come. Remember, the OBR calculates the hit as 4% over 15 years, and we have only been outside the EU for 5 years so far. So we've still got 10 years to go. And remember, that is a short-term forecast. It is very likely, of course, that after those 15 years, the OBR might turn around and say, well, actually, Brexit has had a lot more long-term damage to the economy than we initially predicted. We were saying 4% of those 15 years. Well, guess what? We were proved right, as they are now. 5 years in, 4%. What happens when we are, I don't know, where are we? 2030. That means there's only, quote, 5 years left. Will the OBR turn around and say, well, actually, now we're looking at an even longer prediction. We're even predicting the Brexit damage could be even longer. But there you go. But strangely enough, what he's really missing from his article is the counterbalance. Where are his eminent institutions, the economists and economic modelers who believe that the UK is actually really better off because of Brexit? And of course, by how much? Surely we must be in the sunlit uplands by now. Better regulation and, of course, new trade deals must be working. Removing, of course, the dead hand of Brussels must have created this huge surge in growth and confidence, investment, and, of course, productivity. Again, they all told us that's what leaving the European Union would do, that we would have this massive growth, massive surge in growth, that people would see this and they would come and invest in the UK because they could see this and this would be a good place to invest. It would build confidence, so people would be willing to spend more money in the UK, and of course would boost productivity. What he doesn't understand, and I'd be very interested into this, he doesn't mention anything. The fact that you've seen things like the CHIP Act in America and the Inflation Reduction Act, two, again, from Biden and in the US, amazing things to do. However, those two acts have proven a existential crisis, not only to the European economy, but of course, our economy as well. Like, there is a reason why the EU is looking at doing its own version of the Inflation Reduction Act. And I think, even though Rishi Sunak looked in his own way to try and emulate the Biden Chip Act and basically offered companies nothing, if he had gone the Japan way, which, bear in mind, the subsidies that Rishi Sunak gave were exact same amount of money as Japan, we could have had a brand new chip factory. And, and I would be turning around and saying, well, hold on a second, Rishi Sunak might have absolutely done, nothing at all, but actually he did this one really good thing. But of course he didn't. So there we go. As always, he does nothing. But it is something I think Labour should obviously look into as well. So back to this. Has any of this, of course, ever happened? Have any peer-reviewed papers proving such a bonanza, of course, must be very well hidden. The doppelganger models must seem to be rather silent. Their immaculate, sturdy belief that findings have now somehow not been made into the media or even academics, as far as I can tell. No, Jessup still agrees that with us, as far as Brexit has been damaging to the UK, he thinks less, of course, damaging than others, but damaging all the same. This is the best that he can do for Brexit. Yep, that's why all these people who constantly talk about Brexit, or at least were like big Brexiteers at the time, they don't talk about Brexit as much more. Daniel Hannan would love to talk about anything else but Brexit. Same for Nigel Farage. The only reason you hear him talking about this, and you're probably going to hear him talk about this in a couple of months' time, is that, Starmer's doing a Brexit betrayal because he's talking with the EU. Yeah, we've already seen that song and dance. And if anything, what came out of that, as you saw at the time, were studies from the British public saying, actually, doesn't look like Brexit's been, as good as, they claimed. And I will keep on pointing this out again and again and again. Where we are now in terms of public opinion, people thought we would not be here for like another 4 years. So we're a lot further on than I think people thought from that, and especially the change in sort of public opinion. We've seen that constantly in the polls where this happens. There is just constant damage, and at some point, someone will just take off the blinds and just go, "Why are we continuing this? What are we doing?" And I've always said, I think what the Labour strategy is turn around and say, look, British public, this is Brexit. This is as best it is as it's ever going to be. Are you sure you really want to continue with this? I think that is the direction they seem to be going, because at that point, they can turn around and say, see, we're not betraying Brexit. We tried our best to improve Brexit as best as we can, but this is as best as it is ever going to be. And that way, you cut off any Brexit betrayal. And then you can maybe, start talking with the EU a bit more, about, maybe rejoining some of these, things. But yeah, we've talked about that before. So as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.